Anyway, as previously established, I'm Martin Jonasson. On the internet, I go by the name Grapefrukt. It's one of those names I picked when I was a kid, and it just stuck around. It wasn't on purpose, but here we are. I've been a full-time indie, more or less solo indie since 2011, which is a long time ago. I released my first commercial game in 2012. It's called Rymdkapsel. In hindsight, a very hard name for people who are not from Sweden to pronounce. I figured it'd be like, oh, foreign and interesting, and just like the MDK combination just scares Americans, it turns out. I have made other games as well, one called Twofold Inc., Hold Down, which is my most successful one so far, released in 2018. People are still playing it, which is surprising to me, but nice. And most recently in 2023, I released a game called Subpar Pool. And while I was developing this, I discovered that pool and golf are the same game. Get the ball in the hole. I don't know if you know, if you knew. I didn't, so it was nice to figure out that. And I'm currently working on a sequel for one of these games. I won't tell you which one. If you've seen a talk by me in the past, it's probably this one, Use It or Lose It. That me and my friend Petri did for, I think, some Nordic game thing in 2012. It has 500,000 views on YouTube.
I contributed. I forced all my game design students to watch it.
Yeah, I think it's mostly people getting forced to watch it. I think that's.
I mean, it's great.
Yeah, I regret wearing shorts, but other than that, it's good. I stand by it. There's going to be fewer particles in today's talk, sadly. I have lived and worked here in Malmö for the past 15 years or so. And will keep doing so for many years to come, unless the seagulls get me. Yeah, let's go to the talk. Artisanal random. You know, when you're going to do a talk, people want to know what it's going to be about. Like I don't have that kind of information. I don't know what I'm going to talk about beforehand. I'll figure it out. But the talk is going to be about something I have decided to call artisanal random. But before we get to the artisanal part, I think we should talk a little bit about random first. What is random? So this gets very philosophical very quickly, and we're not going to get too bogged down in that. But like the sort of the first thing that at least comes to my mind when I think about something that's random is just throwing a dice, right? Prime example of random, but also you can make the argument that if you know all the pre-existing conditions for this dice throw, like the position and the wind and all these things, you can replay the dice throw and get the same result again. So is it really random? But like in the real world, we don't have those parameters. We can't recreate the dice throw. Even if we had those parameters, there are going to be tons and tons of variation either way. So for the purposes of this talk, and I guess just like video games in general, random, my personal definition is going to be that random is something that's sufficiently complex and unpredictable to have no discernible pattern. And that's good enough for what we're doing if we're doing games. Like if you're doing cryptography or maybe something that involves actual money, maybe you'll need something a bit more robust, but we're not going to care too much about that today. And this talk is going to have a couple of problems. You'll know there's a problem if the screen's red. Very clear communication here. So the first problem is that computers are not random. Computers are like the exact opposite of random. They very much do the same thing every time. Which is maybe a brave thing to say at the AI summit, but whatever. I'll talk shit about LLMs later. So when we need a random number on a computer, the usual, like the go-to method is a pseudo-random number generator. This is normal standard stuff. I'm sure you've used one in some way or another, even if you didn't know you were using one. But pseudo here is the major part of the word, meaning that it approximates randomness rather than being true randomness. And again, that's like good enough for what we're doing if we're making video games. A typical property for a pseudo-random number generator is they have an initial value, like to start off the generation of random numbers, which you would call a seed. And then that number gets fed through a series of complicated levers and pulleys and whatever math happens. And a random number comes out the other side. And then you keep the internal state of this mystical machine that you have, and you can ask for another number and another number. And this property of a seed turns out to be really, really useful, because as long as we ask for like random numbers in the same way and the seed was the same, we're going to get the same thing that comes out, which is good, because then we can recreate the same randomized level again using the seed only as sort of the starting point, or the seed, as it were. And this is great, unless you're running an online casino or whatever it is you're doing. Suddenly there's like a very big incentive, numbers, money, to figure out the way you generate your random numbers. And if it's seeded, you can maybe figure out what number is going to come next. And if you know what number is going to come next, you can, it is very dangerous for an online casino to do this. And that's when you would want like proper randomness. And then that would involve like actual hardware that does random numbers and stuff. We don't, let's not. Interesting, but not for today. Pseudo-random is good enough for us. There's many different ways to make a random number. This, I think, is the Mersenne twister. I found this image on Wikipedia. I have no idea how this works. But you put some numbers in one side and some other numbers comes out the other side. Programming, basically. It doesn't matter. Like Mersenne twister, cool. Like it's supposedly pretty good, pretty fast. It'll do the job. There's tons of other algorithms as well. It doesn't matter really. But interestingly, you still have to pick a different seed every time for it to be like have the appearance of random, because like, oh, it's random. I rolled the dice when I wrote the thing. So there's a 7 and a 3 and a 10 and or whatever. Like it needs to be different every time. So you need to pick a different seed every time. But this, and the usual practice is to use the date or the time or whatever it is you have. But this is a challenge on simple hardware like the NES. When you turn it on, it's like, hello, the world has started. It has no idea what time it is. It has no idea about anything. So getting a random starting point for your random generator is difficult. Same thing goes for like an Arduino or whatever. Like it will generate random numbers. It's just that the random numbers are the same every time, which requires you to be creative a little bit. So then maybe you start counting time as soon as the console turns on, and you make the player press start in the main menu to start the game. And then however long it took them to press start is the seed for your random generation. And then obviously speedrunners come along and figure out that, oh, if we wait exactly 238 frames before doing this, we can get the good power up when we need it in the specific way, which is like all well and good, but fun. Yeah. So in general, whatever comes with the standard library for whatever it is you're using, programming language, game engine, whatever, it's good enough for making random numbers. And if you don't like it, you can just plonk in another library that will make random numbers for you. It's fine. And yes, so by now we've established a moderate disinterest in whether the randomness is true or not. Like, it doesn't matter. But since we are making games, which is a creative endeavor, we have usually some other constraints on these random numbers. We want them to do other things, and this is the artisanal bit. It's very rare that we want like full-on random everything forever. Usually we want some things to be more common, some things to be less common. You have the classic like RPG thing of like common loot, rare loot, epic loot, that type of thing. Perhaps we're generating levels and we don't want full random. We want some guarantees for like, oh, we want not too many of these, not too few of these, stuff like that. Or even like you're doing some sort of AI and you want to make it a little bit stupider so that your players have a chance, and you want to do that reliably and repeatedly, perhaps random. But a standard random number generator doesn't have any of these knobs. It just makes white noise. And the artisanal bit is shaping this noise into a shape that you can use for what you need. But we have another problem. Humans are really bad at reasoning about probabilities specifically, but also like in general. And like I'm not qualified to say exactly why, but I think humans are basically pattern recognition machines. We're really good at seeing patterns. We're so good at seeing patterns, we'll see them even if there isn't a pattern. And I mean, you can just think about it yourself. Like if you're flipping a coin, and you flip it, and it comes up heads, and you flip it again, it comes up heads, and you flip it again, it comes up heads. You're like, oh my God, incredibly rare. And like, I'm gonna flip it again. Is it gonna be heads a fourth time? And the chance for it to become heads this fourth time is 50% because it's a coin. It's 50% chance. The chance for it to be 4 in a row, obviously lower. But in our heads, these are the same thing, kinda, sorta. So like, we just, like it doesn't work really. And if you like sit down and you think about it maybe, but like this intuitive understanding of probabilities, not super good. And I'm not qualified to say why this is or how this works or whatever, but I am going to dazzle you with a couple of fun thought experiments instead. So I really like this one. A normal deck of cards. There's quite a few ways to shuffle a deck of cards, right? It's 52, but I don't know how familiar you are with math. That's the exclamation point means factorial, which means 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 4, all the way up to 52. So like the first card can go in one spot, the second card can go behind or in front, that's 2 spots. The third card can go in front or behind or in between those 2 first cards, and you keep going. And this will give you the nice round number of whatever the hell this is. That's an 8 followed by 67 digits, I think. The calculator couldn't do the precision in the last few ones, but like, that's okay. This is more configurations of like a deck of cards than there are atoms in the observable universe. Like, it's ridiculous. You could be shuffling a deck hundreds of millions of times a second since the start of the universe, and you still wouldn't be even close. Like, it's ridiculous. I had to cut this like 10-minute section of me explaining how big this number is, because it's just absurd. It's ridiculous. And the fun thing about this is that every time you shuffle a deck of cards, if you shuffle it properly, it's a brand new shuffle. And it's the only time in the history of ever this shuffle will happen, because it's like there's so many of them. Like, there's no fucking way you'll do it another time again. I try not to think too much about this because it just makes my head spin. And you could add like a 53rd card, and it would be 53 times more. It's upsetting, really. And it's just a normal deck of cards. Like, you would feel that you have some like intuitive understanding of how a deck of cards work. Turns out you don't. It's just mind-bending. Another fun like probability example is something called non-transitive dice. It turns out it is possible to make a set of like 6-sided dice, where the red dice, if you roll it and you roll the blue dice, the red dice will show a higher number. And the blue dice will win over the green dice, and the green dice will win over the red dice. It's quite upsetting. And like you can like look at this at home or whatever. It's very confusing. And the expected win rate is about 62%. So like normally you would expect like about half of them to win. But really, if you go with the red dice over the blue dice, you'll win 62% of the time. I don't know what to do with this information. It's just very fascinating to me. And the kicker is that if you have two dice instead, so you have two blue dice versus two red dice, it flips, it goes the other way. So the red dice will win over the green dice, that will win over the blue dice. What the hell? And there are other sets of these dice that have more dice, so there's like 7 of them. And you can actually buy them on the internet, which I wanted to do for this talk, but I didn't do that in time. But they exist in the physical world. Again, I'm not sure how this is useful or relevant for anything, it's just cool. And the third and final distraction before we get back to some like useful information. How many of you have heard of the Monty Hall problem? Oh, a lot of you. That's fun for the rest of you. And this is like a classic thought experiment about probability. And it comes from an American TV show where the host of the show was named Monty Hall. And in the finale, the contestant would get to pick between 3 doors. And behind one of the doors, there's a brand new car. And between the other 2 doors, there's a goat. And no judgment here. I want the car. You can do whatever you do. So you pick a door, whichever door. A, sure. And then the host will open one of the doors you didn't pick and will reveal a goat. And now the question is it to my benefit to swap doors? Because the host will allow me to switch to the other door if I want to. Yes, you should definitely switch. Turns out the probabilities work out that if you pick the first door, you have a 1 in 3 chance to win a car. That's fairly straightforward. But the other door has a 2 in 3 chance to win a car. This has made people upset since the 1970s. It's just like if you sit down and like you draw out the tree of like all the possible outcomes, it will like it's correct, but it's quite upsetting that this is the way it works. And I think this also has like the thing of like, oh, I made a choice, like I want to stick with it. They're trying to trick me by making me switch doors. Anyway, back to the talk and back to another problem. So video games made by humans, and contrary to popular belief, game designers and even programmers are usually humans. And as we've established, humans have a really hard time reasoning about probabilities and randomness. And a second problem, humans are the ones that will be playing the games, for now, at least. I mean, trying to make computers play games as well. But even if I or you, as like the maker of the game, can grasp the randomness and the probabilities of the game, you still have to convey this to your players, because if your players don't understand it, you're still in trouble. They need to form their own mental model of what is going on and what the probabilities are. And we could spend days or weeks or whatever training ourselves to be good at probabilities, but if that's even possible, I don't know. But like I have shit to do and YouTube videos to watch. I'm not gonna learn things. I'm instead gonna do the classic of moving the problem to an area where I have a better intuition. So let's talk a little bit about solutions. So the first one that we touched on already, but that you really should use for your benefit, is seeding your random number generator. It doesn't matter like language or engine specific stuff, but seed your random number generator when you're making levels or anything and just save it alongside your game file. You don't need to show it to your players. You don't need to have it like be settable by your players. It's just really, really useful when you're debugging to be like, oh, I'm just gonna bring it up and like replay the thing. And then, oh, it generated a bad level. If you can just regenerate that bad level in the Unity editor or like with your debugger attached or whatever, incredibly useful. You should do that. And it's one of those things where like if you keep that in mind when you start a new project, it's no extra cost to do, but like adding it in after the fact can be a little bit complicated. Another very useful technique is something called bagged random. And the poster child for this method is Tetris. I'm going to assume you know how Tetris works, but what we care about is that each turn in Tetris you get a random block that you need to place on the playfield. And the way bagged random works is that you take all the possible pieces in Tetris, there's 7 of them, and you put them in a bag. And whenever you need a piece, you draw one from the bag. And the next time you need a piece, that first piece isn't in the bag anymore. So you draw like a second piece, and you keep drawing pieces at random from the bag until you've run out of pieces. Then you put all the pieces back into the bag, and you start over again. This is exactly the way all like modern implementations of Tetris works. This means you will get an even distributions of the block types over time. Repeats will only happen at the intersection of bags. So like the last piece in the bag might be the same one as the first piece when you've remixed the bag, but that's it. Very useful. But early versions of Tetris, most notably the NES version, which is the one they play in all the cool tournaments, doesn't have this system. It works in a different way. It picks a piece at random, and then it will remember the piece you had last time. And if it picks the same piece again, it will re-roll the piece. And if it picks the same piece a third time, sucks to be you. You get the piece. This means that you can go for a very long time and just not get a specific type of piece, like most notably perhaps the long one, which is very useful. Players call this a drought. And you can also get the same piece many times in a row. Less likely, and that's called a flood, which is great drama when you're looking at like an online tournament, which is also cool, but in a different way. And I think it's also more fun when it happens to someone else and you're not the one who's playing. I use bag random for procedural generation a lot, especially for like, oh, I want to place n things in a given level. And it's useful because I can reason about how things will get placed, and it puts some like outer boundaries on where things will be, or like the number of things that will get placed in the levels. I could put 1 big enemy and 8 small enemies in the bag, and I will know there will be 8 small enemies for every big enemy. It just won't happen so that the random decides to do 9 big enemies in one level. And I'm sure somebody will get that level the first time they play as well, so it's going to be extra mean. And if you want a little bit less predictability, you can add multiple sets. So instead of adding the 7 Tetris blocks, you can add them 2 times over, which increases the risk of repeats, but also gives you like more randomness, as it were. And my favorite one, yes, something called pseudo-random distribution. I use this a lot, also for procedural generation stuff. I first heard about this from Dota 2, I think. And it's one of those things that doesn't, like the naming is a little bit weird, so maybe it's used somewhere else before that as well. But if you Google this, you can find some stuff, but it's a little bit dodgy to find exactly what it is. But I will explain it to you so that you will know. So the typical way to make something happen 5% of the time is to roll a random number between 0 and 1. If it's less than our threshold of 0.05, the thing happens. If it's bigger, it doesn't happen. 5% chance, cool. But the thing that can happen here is the same like problem from Tetris, kind of. Either it's never happening because like the random just happens to go high many times, or it can happen 5 times in a row. Like you don't have that kind of control really, which might be cool. But if you're doing like some like online game or wherever, and you want some guarantees for things to behave somewhat reliably, like a slightly more even distribution is probably desirable. And as well with player expectations, like if your random thing doesn't trigger in 5 minutes and then triggers 4 times in a row, players going to be like, hey, buggy game, what the hell? Even though it's random, you don't know. So what you do to do a pseudo-random distribution is you need a magic number. And for 5%, the magic number happens to be 0.0038, which is a much lower number. So it's like less than a tenth of the original threshold. And we do the same thing, like we roll a random number, we check if we're under this threshold. If we are, it hits. If we're not, we double that number. And for the next time, the chance is higher. And if we still miss, we triple that number. So we go up by the count, and that means, like the first time it's going to be 0.0038, the second it's going to be 0.006, and whatever. But the number is going to keep growing, so the probability is going to keep increasing, and eventually the probability will be 100% or more than 100%, so you're guaranteed that it will hit after a certain amount of iterations. And if you pick that number just right, you'll end up at 5% of the time anyway, but you've increased the chance of it happening multiple times in a row, and you've also set it so that if it doesn't happen for a long enough time, it will happen. This is very good and useful and nice. And you need to save one extra number for like the random thing. Like how many times have I tried to do this before? You don't have to care about what happened last time necessarily, you just need to save the counter. The slightly annoying thing is you need all these magic numbers, and ideally you need one for every exact percentage that you desire. I generated this list. It keeps going. It's like 1,000 numbers in here. But the good thing is you only need to calculate them once. You can just save this in a lookup table in your code and be done with it. And I'm sure there's like a fancy math way to do this. I did this the Monte Carlo way, which is just try it a lot of times, and it works. That's why you have 24 cores on your computer. So you can just run random numbers. So I just try the number and make it a little bit bigger until I hit the exact threshold I want, and that works. And then I save it in this table, and I haven't touched this for 5 years or whatever. It's good numbers. I'll post the C# code for this if you want to be horrified by my programming. It's going to go on the Discord. Another really good trick is percentage fudging. And so bringing things back to like player expectations and stuff. If your numbers aren't doing what players expect, you can just lie to your players. It's easy. They don't know. And even if they did know, they have no way of validating like what the real world. You could just lie to them. It's great. There's a talk by Sid Meier's from GDC 2010, I think, where he goes over feedback on civilization revolutions. And players were like, they would fight a battle, and the chances of winning would be 3 to 1. So 3 to win and 1 to lose. And they would lose. And they were like, what the hell? I had the good big numbers. And sometimes they would lose multiple 3 to 1 battles in a row. And they were like, what the double hell? I had very big numbers. What's going on? And players would get frustrated. And you don't want that. And you could probably argue that this is an issue of communicating with your players. Like, how does this percentage thing, chance thing work? Like, what should you expect? And just because you've lost 2 3 to 1 matches in a row doesn't mean you'll get the third one for free. Or you just change it so that the chances are actually slightly better. And if you've lost multiple easy games in a row, you'll have a higher chance of winning, and your players will be happy, and you can go home. Maybe, that's cool. And there's a whole industry based on this called casino. This is the exact same thing, but the other way around. So their whole thing is you won't get the chance numbers ever. But something like a slot machine that you can see here will do every trick in the book to make it seem that you had a better chance at winning rather than you really did. And it's fascinating. It's One of the major innovations in like slot machine technology in like the 80s or whatever was switching from using these, you know, these reels. In a slot machine, you'd maybe have 10 positions on a reel, and you have 3 reels or whatever, which would give you 1,000 different positions, which means that the most rare thing would be a 1 in 1,000 chance. What if you use the computer chip to do the actual like calculations and the randomizations, and you just use the reels as a display? It's a weird display that spins around, but like those aren't picking the numbers anymore. That's not how it works. So then you can have still like there's 10 symbols on the wheel, but the lucky number 7 or whatever has in actuality a much, much lower chance of showing up. And as like an extra bonus, they have also figured out that if you make the window on the slot machine a little bit wider so you can see more numbers, and you make sure that it all often lands on a thing that has the 7 so that you can see it, you're like, oh, I almost won. It's lies, it's just lies. And that's fun. And because it's about money, it's also bad. But I don't deal with money in my games, so I don't feel bad about lying to my players. I quite enjoy it, actually. And that brings us to the end of this talk. And I think my conclusion would be that randomness, like any other thing that goes into the game, just is a part of the texture of the game. And you can use it for good, you can use it for evil. But in the end, it's like up to you as a game designer or the maker of the game to think about like what am I trying to do here? Like, do I care that this is random, or is it just easier for me? What do the players want? What do the players expect? Should I explain it to them? Should I lie to them? All these things are just decisions you need to make as a game designer. And just because something is unreliable, unpredictable, or unfair even, doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It can be fun as well, if you manage to sell it to your players well. And these strategies I showed you here are useful to like sanding off the little lumps and bumps in the randomness. But in the end, it's your call to be like, oh, I do want to keep this. I don't want this. Yeah, and humans are bad at probabilities. Thank you.